Behrens.
Here.
Bills.
Present.
Bowman.
Present.
Kokenauer.
Here.
Crow. Curtis.
Here.
Asbarden.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Crumweedy.
Present.
Lemay. McGinnis.
Here.
McTaggart. Awful.
Here.
Persley.
Present.
Raymond. Shore.
Here.
Sticknot.
Present.
Whitlow.
Here.
15 present, 5 absent.
Raymond is here, he just came in.
Okay.
Mrs. Awful?
Chairman and fellow members, I'd like to introduce Pastor Ryan Mustard from Trinity Church here in Watsika, who will start us in prayer.
Let's pray.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this good day. Lord, I want to thank you for each man and woman here and their commitment to our community. Lord, you gifted them each with skills and abilities and insights, Lord, often from differing perspectives, but that is a valuable thing. And so I pray that you would bring together all those perspectives and insights here today to bring about good for this community. Lord, we acknowledge our dependence upon you. We acknowledge our need for you. Father, we want to thank you for the recent rains to be able to help for the crops. We pray for your hand upon this community, Lord, that folks would thrive. We need your help with that. And so we acknowledge who you are, we acknowledge your word, and we ask for help, Lord, that we would follow your ways, that you would be glorified among this people. We thank you in Christ's holy name. Amen.
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, you have a copy of the agenda in front of you. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Bills, second. Mrs. Awful. Any questions about the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Everybody was sent a copy of the minutes from the May 8th session. Are there any questions about those minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
Someone.
Mr. Bowman, is there a second? Mr. Crumweedy seconds. Seeing no questions, all in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign. That motion passes. Payroll. Mr. Crumweedy, is there a second? Mr. Alt, are there any questions about the payroll? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Kokenauer.
Yes.
Curtis.
Yes.
Asbarden.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Crumweedy.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Awful.
Yes.
Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt.
That motion's approved, 16-0. Public comments. Seeing none, we'll move on to outside organization reports. Mr. Baragry.
Good morning. Not too many faces here that I haven't seen, too many strange faces. You guys are just not being controversial enough lately, I guess. But I'm Ken Baragry. I'm the Executive Director of the Iroquois Economic Development Association. We are not a county committee. We're an outside organization, but we are supported in part by the county board as well as communities and many, many businesses. Most of my comments are kind of updates from things that we've discussed previously. I mentioned last month that I wrote a letter to Governor Rauner asking that certain areas in the county be declared opportunity zones. There were 5 areas that I asked the governor to designate and include in the program. I was a little disappointed that only 1 was approved, but we did get 1 at least. I wanted all 5 approved so that we could get most of the communities in the county involved in that, but the one that was approved was primarily around Watseka, especially the flooded zones, but it also, I don't think you, I got a little map here, but I don't think you can really see it, but it covers, this zone covers clear outside the city limits on the north side of town, and then it comes down here. It does extend out, whoops, I got it upside down, I'm not even reading it. It does extend out and include the county's ground out to the County Farm Road and on out to Route 1 too. It's kind of an odd shaped thing, but at least we got one more thing that we can bring to the table and promote. Now we're required to form an official entity to manage the Opportunity Fund. It's an opportunity zone. The money will be in an opportunity fund. That fund needs to be managed by an entity. So as the investors with capital gains begin to inject some money into that, there's a group that can handle it. It means more government red tape, I guess, but I'm working with Mayor John Allhands on that since it's primarily around Watseka. I also mentioned enterprise zones in previous meetings. You will remember that the EZs, as they call them, are geographic areas in which policies to encourage economic growth and development are implemented. As I mentioned before, zone policies generally offer tax concessions, infrastructure incentives, and reduced regulations to attract investments in private companies into the zones. The state, of course, I read a list before, offers incentives, but they also have to approve these zones, and they're not automatic. It's a challenge sometimes to get that kind of thing done. But at Friday's zoning meeting, we discussed a number of things, and I agreed at that time to pursue the possibility for Iroquois County to be designated as an enterprise zone. One of the points there at Friday's meeting, listen closely to the minutes when that one comes up for zoning, had a lengthy discussion on ways to encourage more construction projects within the county. We're in a tough position for development right now. As we stated in the meeting, state of Illinois, the proximity to Indiana, the amazing low unemployment figures, but yet every day you pick up the paper and somebody's closing stores and laying people off. I'm not sure where all those numbers come from. But if we could get an approval for the enterprise zone, we could, maybe these two programs could run in tandem and offer some incentives that might help us get some things going. I hope some of you continued watching the Nichols Paint and Fab TV series called Wrenched. There's still couple more episodes to come. It's on Tuesday nights at 9 o'clock on the Velocity channel. If you've missed any, I'm sure Velocity will rerun it. You can just check your local listings, whatever you subscribe to. But I did notice a post on Facebook that I got a kick out of. Somebody posted on there, Hollywood and Iroquois County. Who'd have thunk it? We talked about the city of Watseka applying for flood mitigation grant through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. That's to tear down severely damaged homes. They are doing a good job really trying to get that effort handled. They've asked former Mayor of Watseka, Bob Harwood, to head up that program. Bob's also the point man for the Iroquois County Long-Term Recovery Committee. So I think they're getting all the pieces in place. You will recall that I also expressed concern before about when they tear those houses down, that we would need. Some people won't get enough money to buy a house on the dry side of town, so we may need to do something for accommodations to accommodate them at any rate. I'm hoping that the opportunity zone, and if we could possibly get an enterprise zone, those two might work in hand to solve some of those problems with some housing. Thursday night here in this room, we had Representative Bennett, Tom Bennett, held a town hall meeting. There weren't a lot of people that attended, maybe 15, I don't know. But the discussion was pretty lively, and some of the citizens went right after the representative and expressed some serious concerns that they had about things that were going on. The discussions centered mostly around flooding. It seems to never get over the discussions about flooding. And the state's balanced budget, if you can call it that. There were some, if you look at that budget, there's some extremely speculative revenue figures included in order to put it in the black, so we'll see. But Tom did also add that the state was implementing some tax credits to aid some of the victims from flooding. There was also a mention of Iroquois County leading the nation in limiting gun control, and pretty spirited discussion, very spirited discussion about the pros and cons of legalizing marijuana. Just a few more miscellaneous comments. One of the potential buyers for the Bosch building has shown a seriously strong interest. Not a done deal by any means. There's a couple of other buildings they're looking at out of the area, but maybe allowing a little hope to creep in. It'd be great to see something happen there. It would be a factory operation. There should be some decisions made pretty soon on the McDonald's move too. Nothing that I could really update on except that I feel we're not going to lose them at least. They're going to rebuild. The Little Caesar sign is up at the Scotchman's West. I don't know if you noticed. I checked. They weren't quite ready to open, but they're moving forward. And finally, I guess the SBA's deadline, I don't know if anybody in here would be affected by it, but you could help spread the word. The SBA's deadline to submit disaster applications for help from the flooding, that deadline is July 6th. The SBA has left, but you can go online if you haven't done anything with it. Time is getting short. It is called the Small Business Administration, but it could be businesses of all sizes, nonprofit organizations. Homeowners, renters, they can all take advantage of the low interest loans if they qualify. The damages, of course, had to occur between February 14th and March 4th. So if you know anybody that still needs some help and they need a low interest loan, it's the place to go. Questions? Disagreements? Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
What's going on with Burgers and Beer? Nothing?
I guess that's probably the word that sums it up. They keep saying that they're intending to come here, but I've seen no efforts whatsoever on that particular building. I guess still I think it's probably it was probably not the best choice, and there's some maybe serious concerns on their part of what's going to happen, but they continue to say that they're making plans, they've got blueprints drawn up and that type of thing, but no, nothing. That's probably the word that's best expresses it right now.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Have any other outside organization reports this morning? Seeing none, we'll go to the committee reports. Members of the county board, your committee to whom was referred policy and procedure would beg leave to submit the following report on the matters before them. Your committee met at the Administrative Center on May 31 at 9 a.m. Members present were County Board Chairman John Scheer, Lyle Behrens, Russell Bills, Daniel Raymond, and Marvin Sticknoth. Kyle Anderson and Troy Crumweedy were absent. Also present, County Clerk Lisa Fancher, Supervisor of Assessments Bob Yergler, County Engineer Joel Moore, 911 Director Eric Raymond, EMA Coordinator Eric Stacey, ICPHD Administrator D. Shippert, State's Attorney Jim Devine, members of the Democratic Central Committee Paula Rosso and David Trout, County Board Member Charlie Alt, and Wendy Davis with the Times-Republic. The meeting was called to order. It was moved by Mr. Sticknott and seconded by Mr. Bills to approve the agenda. That motion carried by a voice vote. Paula Rosso introduced herself as a former member of the Lotus Sanitary District and current member of the Democratic Central Committee. She explained the chairman of the Democratic Central Committee was not able to be in attendance. However, she was present to speak to the committee regarding an issue involving the monthly meeting of the Democratic Central Committee and their lack of access to the county boardroom, where their meetings are usually held. Their chairman was informed shortly before the meeting that they would not be able to hold their meeting in the boardroom because of security risks, which she then questioned. She asked how the situation could have happened and how it could be prevented in the future. Chairman Schur said the matter would be discussed under new business. The committee chairman gave their monthly reports. Highway Chairman Russell Bills reported the Highway Department will receive their monthly reports and claims. Planning and Zoning Chairman Dan Raymond said his committee will receive their normal reports as the Zoning Board of Appeals did not convene as expected. Management Chairman Lyle Behrens confirmed his committee will open trash hauling bids. They will talk about building and room issues at the Administrative Center in addition to solar farm discussion. The Judicial Committee will receive regular monthly reports. Tax Chairman Marvin Sticknott will also be given monthly reports from department heads. County Board Chairman John Schur received an invitation from the Iroquois River Conservancy District to attend a meeting on June 14 in Rensselaer, Indiana to discuss flooding issues. EMA Coordinator Eric Stacy gave his EMA report, which consisted of a fish and wildlife kill in Coon Creek, a tributary of Sugar Creek. He said it was an accident involving the farm chemical liquid nitrogen fertilizer that spilled into the creek, deoxygenating the water, killing approximately 150,000 fish along the 10-mile stretch. He confirmed that this isn't something that needs to be cleaned up, such as the case in an oil spill where the substance sits on top of the water. The responsible party is working with the EPA and DNR to rectify the situation. The EMA report also included events and projects that Eric has been busy with, including quarterly EMA volunteer training, the monthly EMA drill, and a hazard mitigation plan meeting with municipalities. Also, there was a Small Business Administration Disaster Loan Outreach Center at the Watseka Union Depot, which was set up for those affected by the recent flood to apply for disaster loans. Lastly, Eric presented a proposal to the committee regarding a vehicle for EMA. He was approached by a local citizen that wanted to bid on and donate a vehicle for EMA purposes. However, Eric didn't want to proceed without being able to present to the board the approximate cost of insurance, title, maintenance, and fuel. Currently, the EMA coordinator utilizes his personal vehicle for EMA operations with mileage reimbursement coming in approximately $1,750 per year. After contacting Roger Schultz Insurance, Eric was given an annual quote for insurance of $933. He estimates 2 oil changes per year at $100 and approximately $500 for additional maintenance per year, with no repairs anticipated in the immediate future. By taking the estimates and recent gasoline costs into consideration, the anticipated amount for the vehicle per year would be $2,350. Eric commented that the vehicle will come equipped with specialized equipment, including 2 light bars, a spotlight, 2 antennas with space for more, siren and public address system, controls for the aforementioned equipment, and coax and electrical wiring. The vehicle, a 2007 Suburban 2500, has approximately 80,000 miles, has four-wheel drive, and has towing capability as well. In closing, Eric said this donated vehicle would boost emergency management capability, reduce reliance on his personal vehicle, and simplify liability in case of an accident. The committee discussed the proposal and agreed this donation would be an asset to Iroquois County EMA. It was noted that should the vehicle be driven home by the EMA coordinator, it would become a taxable benefit. However, if it is not utilized in this manner, it would remain parked at the courthouse. The Health Department has offered to pay the insurance on the vehicle for the remainder of this fiscal year in the amount of $540 with an MOU to be signed. It was moved by Mr. Bills and seconded to accept the donation and assume the additional cost of approximately $600 per year above what is currently paid in mileage. That motion carried unanimously by a roll call vote. Chairman Scher presented the 2018-2019 liquor license applicants for approval. It was moved by Mr. Raymond and seconded to approve the 2018-2019 liquor license applicants as presented. That motion carried by a voice vote. The committee discussed the telecommunicator arbitration ruling and contract that was forwarded to legal counsel for review. An email was distributed to the committee from Mr. Powers, the labor attorney hired after the arbitration ruling. Many on the committee wanted to be sure loose ends were tied up and wanted to ensure the contract was worded correctly. It was moved by Mr. Behrens and seconded to approve the telecommunicator contract as is, unless legal counsel changes it before the county board meeting. That motion carried unanimously by a roll call vote. Chairman Scher noted the following reappointments will be made at county board meeting. Steve Rapp to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire in December 2022, and Peggy Schofler to the Board of Review for a term to expire in May 2020. Correspondence was distributed to the committee. The committee reviewed the claims. It was moved by Mr. Raymond and seconded to pay the claims subject to county board approval. A roll call vote was taken. Motion carried unanimously. There was no old business. Chairman Scher began the new business portion of the meeting by explaining a situation that arose on Thursday, May 24, when the Democratic Central Committee did not have access to the county boardroom for their regular meeting. He felt there were miscommunications and misunderstandings which caused the problem. He said he was notified of the meeting by 911 Director Eric Raymond, who consulted Chairman Scher when he was asked to allow the Democratic Central Committee access through the 911 center. Mr. Raymond voiced concerns about security and liability, which Chairman Scher agreed could be a potential problem. It was then conveyed to the chairman of the Democratic Central Committee that they would not be able to access the building through the 911 center. He said this was a regrettable situation which needs to be corrected. Chairman Scher went on to explain to the committee that there should be a policy put into place for meetings to convene in the administrative center after the building has been closed for the evening. In the past, there was a janitor that worked during the evening who was able to open and subsequently close the building for meetings after hours. It was also noted that there was an employee willing to come in and open the doors for the Democratic Central Committee until recently, when she decided that she was unable to commit any more of her time for the task. County Clerk Lisa Fancher said there isn't anyone willing to wait around after hours to open the doors for these meetings. Supervisor of Assessments Bob Yugler commented that employees should not be responsible for opening or closing the building unless they are in a supervisory position. Management Services Committee Chairman Lyle Barron said the Management Services Committee would address the situation. He said there should be a policy that is clear, short, and fair. His thought was that if the meeting isn't government related or being held by one of the renters in the building, there should be no access to the building. All other groups, including the Republican and Democratic Central Committees, would have to find somewhere else to meet. Lastly, Chairman Scher said the policy would not take effect immediately in order to allow any group currently using the boardroom the time to find another place to hold their meetings. As there was no further business to come before the committee, it was moved by Mr. Bills and seconded to adjourn at 10 a.m. That motion carried by a voice vote, all of which is respectfully submitted and signed by all members present, and I move for its adoption. Mr. Bills, second. Are there any questions or comments about the report? Mr. Bowman.
I'd like to pull the paragraph out about the EMA bid for separate consideration.
That's the large paragraph on the second page. Mrs. Crowe?
I second that.
Okay. Any question about the motion? Call the roll, please.
Bills.
No.
Bowman.
Yes.
Okenauer.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
Curtis. Hasbargen.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Apple.
No.
Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
No.
Shore.
No.
Sticknot.
No.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt.
No.
Barons.
No.
11-7, motion carried.
Okay.
Well, I guess my concern is that why do we really need this bid?
Well, I think there's quite a few ways of looking at that, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question. Unfortunately, Mr. Stacy isn't here today. But I think one of the things that we need to look at is that why should he be required to have his own personal vehicle for county business?
I was just through the payroll. Looks like Mr. Iman gets mileage for his car, and he drove 1,849 miles last month.
That's correct.
So, and he has his own car.
But he
I
doesn't,
can't see any advantage when we're going $600 right off the bat in the hole.
Mr. Iman doesn't have to drive into some of the areas that Mr. Stacy could have to drive in, like flooded areas and so forth. Mr. Kokenar?
So, it says here, no repairs anticipated in the immediate purchase. Who's gonna pay for those repairs? We know that the vehicle's got 80,000 miles on it. We know that's gonna have to have repairs. Who's gonna pay for those? Us?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's to stop every other department head from wanting their own vehicle for county purposes? That'd be my question.
Okay. Mr. Whitlow?
I don't think $500 a year for maintenance on a vehicle that age is realistic at all. I mean, that's not even a set of tires anymore. That's a very low estimate for, and do we know who, did we ever say who the person was to make the donation?
Did he say that?
Did anybody state who it was? Or?
It was Mr. Minor. Is there a problem with that?
No, thank you, Well, only personal.
What?
I said maybe a few personal concerns that I would just soon not address right now.
Mrs. Crowe?
We previously sort of set a precedent about buying extra vehicles. We've done away with a lot of that.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
We previously had problems or concerns about additional vehicles for the county, and we've tried to do away with that. And as I understand, it's really a low mileage annually that Mr. Stacy uses his vehicle. So I'm suggesting, is there not another vehicle that the county presently owns that could be made available that is parked sometimes during the hours that he needs it to attend meetings and other things? The second thing is, I have a problem with us being a governmental agency accepting donations from private individuals. When that's done in Springfield and Washington, it's called lobbying. And I believe donations like that always come with strings attached, and that would be another concern that I have.
Okay. Mr. Crumweedy?
Couple things. I don't believe there's a motion on the floor, so I would like to push this back to the committee. For one, Mr. Cece's not here today, so I would think that in order to, or he would be here to discuss whether or not he's going to use a personal vehicle or accept one. So I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Is there a second? Mrs. Awful?
Yeah, just to send it back to.
Back to committee.
Are there any questions or comments about the motion?
I do have some comments to make on that, if I may.
Okay.
For one, I think the current setup would be the best, because in that type of field, you would think he would just want to be in one vehicle all the time, whether he's on his personal time or that, because an emergency could arise at any time. So you know, to go back and forth between two vehicles with equipment and whatever he has to have, that would be a little more cumbersome, I would think.
Okay.
Just an opinion.
I guess one of the things that enters into this discussion is that when you have an individual who is required to do traveling on county business, are you requiring that they purchase a certain type of vehicle that's suitable for that business? Mr. Cece has already indicated that the vehicle that he has right now is getting pretty old, and he's has some serious concerns about it. If that vehicle isn't serviceable anymore, are we going to require that he go out and buy a new vehicle in order to perform his job? I think that's something the board needs to take into consideration. Mr. Behrens?
I guess as far as the vehicles that we've been trying to get rid of, we weren't trying to get rid of any. I believe maybe she was mentioning the maintenance department. It was just that it was not to be used for personal use, because that becomes a tax liability. And having a vehicle like this that has lights on it in an emergency situation versus him just having his flashers going would be good. Moving equipment back and forth from vehicles, you wouldn't have to do that, because you could have this vehicle set up and ready to go. You could jump in it and go to whatever emergency, rather than having to load stuff into his personal vehicle and go to an emergency. So, I mean, there are benefits to having a vehicle like this.
Mr. McGinnis?
A properly ran EMA department has its own vehicle with the proper lights, the proper siren, the proper radios, so that there's a proper response. It's unprofessional to use a personal vehicle. Granted, there's a cost, but if we want to try to improve the image of Iroquois County, to try to show prospective businesses and people, you know, that we are a ready county, having proper equipment is the right way to go. I'm not worried about people. If they want to donate, yeah, we can research the strings. But I've had some experience in the military. I've gotten to tour the EMA down in Springfield and was part of a unit that was for quick response, and all the professional organizations that actually ran well had a proper vehicle with everything in it, and it's just something that's the right thing to do. As far as other county departments or other employees like Mr. Iman, his job doesn't require where he has to have lights, sirens, and the proper emergency gear to do what he wants. Yeah, we could provide a vehicle to cut down mileage, but that's a different scenario as far as the position goes. This is an emergency vehicle that's required, and we need one, and for him to do his job right. So this is something that we should pass and give him the proper equipment if we want to have a properly ran EMA. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Crowe?
We previously set a precedent with our EMA, and a vehicle, although not opulent, was provided, and I still believe there's a white pickup truck, there's a transport van, there's another vehicle that belongs to probation, there's one in the sheriff's department, and there's one in maintenance, that those vehicles at a time of a flood, if you want lights and sirens, then let's pay to put them on there, and let's follow the precedent firmly established previously.
Does anybody else have any comments? Mr. Cromweedy?
I'd like to speak a second time to my motion. Again, I'd like to have this sent back to committee. It should align with his job description, the policy and procedure manual, and we should get a better picture of what the actual stipulations are on the vehicle.
Anybody else? Mr. Hasbargen?
I know the past history of Mike Minor, and there is a history of wanting something. When he gives something, he wants to give, just a minute, he wants to give rocks, he wants to give plaques, and if you don't let him have the rocks and plaques, then he comes and takes back what he's given. So I think we need to be aware of strings attached like this.
Anybody else? Mr. Sticknall?
I was the ESDA coordinator for my township in the 80s, I believe it was. There's a lot more involved here than what you would imagine. How many of you have been out in flooded areas wading through the water rescuing people? How many of you have tried to go through snowstorms to rescue people? I used my pickup truck at the time because there was no other way. But it was four-wheel drive. It was equipped to tow. The only way I could communicate was you throw a radio on the seat and you stick an antenna on the roof magnetically. That's not very desirable. So when you have emergency situations, you need a vehicle that's prepared.
Mrs. Crowe? Keep in mind, we have a motion on the floor to send this back to the committee.
The EMA coordinator is not a first responder, and there are other people with the proper vehicles responding to people in floodwater and in storms. The EMA coordinator runs the show from the EOC.
Anybody else? Seeing nothing else, the clerk.
That way everybody can hear me. February, we had a massive flood. Probably biggest we've seen in my lifetime. It's been pretty bad. So I find it ironic that people that were praising the EMA department 4 months ago are now criticizing them over personal beliefs and personal feelings. I will leave it at that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to send this back to the committee. Seeing that there's no further comments, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Bowman.
No.
Kokenauer.
No.
Crow.
No.
Curtis.
Yes.
Hasbargen.
No.
Johnson. Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
No.
McGinnis.
No.
Awful.
Yes.
Persley.
No.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
No.
Alt.
Yes.
Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
It's like 9 to 9, that motion did not carry.
Okay. Mr. Kokenauer?
I'd like to make a motion that we do not accept the donation of this vehicle for EMA.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Hasbargen. Any questions or comments on this motion? Mr. Behrens?
Well, I think, what? I guess I want to ask the sheriff, those vehicles that were mentioned, do I recall right, were they not in service once Ms. Crow said the maintenance vehicles and stuff?
There's 3 vehicles that were salvaged, I guess you could use the word for lack of a better term. The truck that we used to push snow with, the old white transport van, which was given to EMA, which they didn't use at the time, and then a small SUV that was a Jeep that was bought by 2 administrations ago for a patrol vehicle. I've talked with Mr. Cece about this. I'm currently right now sitting on 2 police package Impalas that we're getting rid of that will replace this budget year. They've got high miles on them, but the upkeep is very good on them. I probably have 2 or 3 light bars in the maintenance shed that we have upgraded away from that would still work on a limited basis, something that we don't want to run 24 hours a day but would still work. And we have some mobile radios that are still around too that could be put into those cars. They could be marked. I offered those to him to use to go to his meetings or his response to a situation, which I think is a practical thing. Can I give my 2 cents on this?
Sure.
Okay.
Please.
One of the things that Illinois has done very well, one of the few things that Illinois has done very well, is prepared for natural disasters or acts of terrorism. And that's through the Mavis Association and the Illinois Law Enforcement Alarm System. So anytime any community in the state has a natural disaster or some type of terrorist activity or man-made activity, there's going to be a huge response to it. It doesn't solely fall on civil defense or ESDA or EMA as we call it now anymore like it used to years ago. So you have all these assets coming forward. I know where I'm going to be if there's that type of disaster in Iroquois County. I'm going to be in an operations center where all the information that's coming in, the people that are making the decisions on what to do are going to be there to have that information to decide who you're sending, where you're sending, and what you're sending. My guess would be that Mr. Cece would be in there as well. So solely relying on ESDA needs a vehicle to take equipment somewhere, although they can do that, that's not going to be a priority for them. Because you're going to have your fire departments, as Mr. Sticknott mentioned, Mavis divisions are going to get involved and bring communication centers in. They're going to bring trailers in, they're going to bring tents in, they're going to bring all that stuff. From the law enforcement side of it, same thing's going to happen. Squad cars, police officers, radio equipment, all that kind of stuff is going to come flooding into the area. And so the people who are dealing with the situation are going to be in the operations center, like I said, making the decisions on what takes priority and what's handled first. So if you're looking at it, some of you solely as a vehicle to go to these meetings and cut down on mileage, I told him I'd let him have the pick of the 2 squads if he wants that. And, all he'd have to do is get municipal plates put on it, the title get transferred to Iroquois County Emergency Management Agency. And what equipment that I have, I'm more than willing to, it's an older style light bar, and it's a 100-watt radio, which would be a good radio for it, that he could have as well. So, but as far as the vehicles we have to pull a trailer at the sheriff's office, we don't really. We've got one maintenance pickup that is a 2-wheel drive Dodge that's quite old, and I wouldn't trust her pulling a trailer somewhere around the county. Does that answer your question?
Mrs. Shepherd.
The second largest grant that the health department holds is the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Grant. I was the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Coordinator for approximately 6 years. There's an intense amount of training. Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Training Program. There are only 2 people in this county that I know of that have taken that training, and that's Eric Cece and myself. There are a lot of NIMS training courses that are required by emergency preparedness personnel. Until you've taken those courses, I don't think you truly understand what can happen in an emergency. The simplified answer that Mr. Stacey will be in the Emergency Operations Center if there is a disaster is absolutely not accurate. He will have to go out and assess the scene. He will be in charge of calling some of those resources in, especially state and federal resources. Those cannot be called in by the Sheriff's Department, I'm sorry. That's not a legal, an appropriate mechanism of calling in resources from the state for state assets. The state will not acknowledge that unless they come from an EMA director. There are a lot of extenuating circumstances that go into a disaster. Mr. Stacey will be in charge of finding someone, if not himself, to do volunteer management. Do you have any idea the amount of spontaneous mass volunteers that show up on a scene? They're good people who want to help, but create a disaster within a disaster with good intentions. There is an extremely large amount of training that goes into that position. I don't think it's fair to make a decision without Mr. Stacey's input. I don't think it's accurate. I think you have put him in the position, you have sent him for this training, you have put our safety and our health in his hands. At least be willing to hear him out, because I know that there are things today that are being said and assessed by people who do not have all the information that they need to make those kinds of comments. And I don't think that until you are put in a position where you are sent away for a week and you are running through disaster drills and having to manage them with NIMS 307 or 308 or what, I think it's 304, NIMS 304 training, where you go to the Army National Guard Center. I went to Springfield for a week. I know Eric went for a week. Until you are put in those positions where you have to look at all the things that can happen in an emergency, I think that sitting there and making an assessment on something that you really don't have a full understanding of is inappropriate.
This is awful.
Well, is that on? Can you hear me?
Turn it on.
It's not working. Anyway,
Just speak real loud.
didn't our taxpayers a while back vote for the safety tax? Was that not part of it? And also, the Suburban, that's higher off the ground, that can get through high waters, probably more so than a police car.
Mr. Crumweedy.
Again, the committee needs to bring a proposal to this board that's a little more favorable, and they need to do a little more due diligence on their research.
Mr. McGinnis.
I have some experience in emergency management, as I've told you. If there's a huge countywide emergency, probably there needs to be somebody in the operations center all the time. But minor emergencies, if the coordinator of the agency doesn't put his feet on the ground part of the time, he doesn't know exactly what's going on, and he's not doing due diligence. You do not sit in the operations center all the time running this. You've got to be out, and you've got to know what's happening.
Mr. McGinnis.
like to concur everything that Dee said. I've been taking a lot of NIMS training to work with a group called Team Rubicon, and then I've also been forwarding that to Eric. During the floods, we used my truck. I did check my area up north. I also rode with another volunteer of his in his personal vehicle, solely because four-wheel drive and high, and we needed it. And we also had a couple citizens that when we pulled up got extremely nervous because they saw a personal vehicle pulling up with two guys getting out to do some assessments. Kind of awkward, we calmed them down. I threw some business cards, explained, we're legit and all that. But you need the height. The vehicle will not, in an emergency, the vehicle will be used by more than just Mr. Sacy because of the needs of the EOC. It will have to go out. It has to be four-wheel drive. It has to be tall. It has to have capability. If you go on the FEMA website and start taking some NIMS courses and looking at what's all involved, it'll blow your mind, some of the requirements. I'm looking at it purely from a personal experience and knowledge and training, and proper equipment is everything just in case. So I would like to reconsider Troy's previous motion. I voted on the winning side to send it back, and I will change my vote to yes. Oh, well, reconsider can come up after that.
Mrs. Crowe.
I helped Mr. Sacy during the last flood answer phones in the EOC. It was an enlightening and a learning experience. This is a business discussion for the county, and in no way am I criticizing Mr. Sacy's performance at that time. I do have a question, however. Is there any thought, how will we divide the use between his health department hours and the EMA hours? Is there any thought that this will be available for the health department?
Yes, the health department offered to pay for the insurance for the remainder of this fiscal year with an MOU that the health department would also be able to use the vehicle when it's not in use by EMA. We have a Region 6 trailer out here that is a heavy trailer. No one who works at the health department has a vehicle other than Mr. Sacy's current vehicle now, which I don't think he's planning to keep, but I'm not going to speak for that. I know my Camaro won't haul that trailer. There are times when we have to take simple things, even tables and chairs out to the county fair. I can't get them into my Camaro. I shouldn't be required, as the health department administrator, to drive a truck every day. But there are times when we need to haul things. Lots of times we need to haul things. It would be nice not to have to borrow my husband's truck from him and make him switch vehicles with me. But that's what I do. We picked up water. You remember at a health committee meeting not too long ago, right after the flood, I told you that we picked up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bottles of water from Equality Solutions in Hoopeston and drove it to Woodland when they were under a boil order so that the residents would have drinking water. I explained to you that my husband's vehicle, which is a truck, which is a pretty big truck, rode a wheelie all the way back from Hoopeston, literally, because the water was so heavy. There are times when we need more than a Chevy Impala or a Camaro convertible to haul things. So it would be nice if we could have an MOU with Eric, with the EMA department, which we have discussed the possibility of, where we cooperate and help each other and work together. There's nothing wrong with working together for the good of the residents of Iroquois County.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Sheriff?
I would just like to readdress, this discussion isn't about who's going to be where to make a phone call for state assets. There's a whole process that goes into place for that. We know through the flood that the chairman and the board had to declare a disaster area to get a lot of those state assets rolling. So I'm talking about a situation where whether it's a county-wide or just in a certain part of the county, there are other agencies out there. I can make a phone call today through ILEAS. All 102 counties in the state belong to it. Over 900 police departments belong to it. And whatever assets are out there that I need in Iroquois County right now, I can get them headed this way, and I don't have to go through EMA. I don't have to call the governor. I don't have to do any of that. I can make that phone call. Mavis is the same way with the fire department. So all I'm saying is yes, there are going to be times where whoever the boss is of EMA is going to have to go out and obviously view the scene of things. But if some of you are putting all your eggs in a basket saying, well, there's nothing available out there, and if this vehicle isn't with ESDA or with EMA, that there's going to be things that county citizens are going to do without, that they're not going to be able to get whatever it is they need, is not necessarily true, because there's other assets out there that are going to be deployed that are going to come in. So, and as far as that goes, if you're looking at a vehicle, why not, there's state bid on brand new vehicles, and if it's a cost thing, but you can get vehicle brand new, you can, I can tell you right now, I may be coming to the table because the Chevy Tahoe makes a police package, and when the deputies are out there in wintertime and when they're driving through water and they're driving through snow, and it's critical that we have vehicles that get through, I'll be at the table asking for Tahoes for all my guys. So I'm just saying that, it's not a services are gonna, Iroquois County residents are gonna go without services because of one vehicle not being here.
Mrs. Shippert?
I do agree with Sheriff Hagan, because as a public health emergency preparedness person and a public health administrator, I too can call 92 other health departments in the state of Illinois and get 200 nurses here immediately. That's not the issue. We've gone off on a trail here that has become a different conversation. Of course we can get assets in Iroquois County. Of course we're going to have responders. Of course we are. But the job that I do during an emergency, let's say we had to mass vaccinate or mass prophylax the entire county population in Iroquois County. I can get enough nurses here from other counties to help vaccinate those people, but I have to have those plans in place, and I have to have the equipment to do it. Okay? The Sheriff's Department can certainly respond to whatever they need to. But we're different agencies and we're different organizations, and even though we work cooperatively together, and we should, we also have our unique and individual jobs to do. Counties have an EMA coordinator because that's a position that needs to fill specific roles during an emergency, different from the roles of public health, different from the roles of the Sheriff's Department. We've gotten off on a conversation here that I think is leading to something that should be understood by everyone. So my point is, EMA has their own roles. Mr. Stacey has had his own training. He knows what he needs to do in an emergency better than most people do. Certainly better than I do. Certainly better than most people do. But until you've taken the training that he's taken and know about the possibilities that can happen and the pathway to appropriately mitigate any kind of disaster in your county, we shouldn't be speaking for him. I don't think that that's appropriate. And I've said it before, but I'm going to continue to say it, hoping someone will understand.
Anybody else? Mr. Bills?
Mr. Chairman, I find it hard to believe that we've had a 30-minute conversation about a potential $600 budget change. That I can see the bottom line is this board wants to micromanage our personnel. That I thought this board's primarily position was to regulate the budget and how we spend our money, and not necessarily tell our department heads on how best to do their business on a daily basis. You know, we've just chased off some personnel just in the last 60 days because of our board's actions on handling personnel. I would think that we really ought to be spending most of our time on the little paragraph, 2 paragraphs down in the same policies and procedure report, where we could be looking at a $100,000 to $200,000 little problem just with language in a contract that nobody seems to care about. That is in the same report that we started with. So I would, I don't know what motion's on the floor right now, but I think we need to move on because it's quite obvious where we're going with this.
The motion on the floor is to deny Mr. Stacy the use of this vehicle. I guess the comment that I would make after listening to what everybody has had to say would mirror what you've just said, Mr. Bills. For $600, it seems to me that it might be something we ought to do and see how it works. You know, there isn't any law or anything that says after a year or whatever that the vehicle can't be sold and the whole idea is scrapped if it's not going to work or doesn't work out. And here one guy says, oh, it won't work, another one says it will work, one says we don't need it, another one says we do. Why don't we do it and find out? That's my thought. Mrs. Johnson, could you speak into your microphone, please?
So there's been a lot of discussion all over the place, and I agree, we've gotten off track. Is there a policy and procedure in place if this vehicle was to come into fruition? Is there something that states how it can be used, how it cannot be used, or are we going to purchase something and then after the fact go back and try to make policy on it? Because if that's the case, then as Mr. Crumwitty said, it doesn't matter who gives us the vehicle, if it comes from the sheriff's office or if it comes from a donor, whatever. There needs to be a policy on how it's used, who's going to use it, and for what purposes it'll be used before we even make this consideration at all. Let's just put it in the right order.
I think that was part of the reason that Mr. Crumwitty wanted to send it back to committee. Anybody else?
Motion is to not accept the donation of a vehicle for EMA.
Oh, yes, did we not? Yes. Yes, votes to do.
Seeing no further questions, the clerk will call the roll, please.
If you vote yes, that means we don't accept the vehicle.
Ready? Kokenauer.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
Curtis.
No.
Hasbargen.
Yes.
Johnson. Crumweedy. Lemay.
No.
McGinnis.
No.
Awful.
No.
Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
No.
Schuer.
No?
Sticknot.
No. No.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt.
No.
Behrens.
No.
Bills.
No.
Bowman.
Yes.
So that motion is 7 for and 11 against, so motion failed. Now what are you gonna
Mr. Chairman, I move to reconsider the vote on Mr. Crumwitty's proposal to refer back to the committee.
Second.
I was on the winning side for record purposes.
Is there any questions? You seconded the motion, Mrs. Johnson? Mrs. Offler, excuse me. Are there any questions about the motion? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Crow. No. Curtis. Hasbargen.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Apple.
Yes.
Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt.
Yes.
Barons.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Kokenauer.
Yes.
17-1, motion carried.
Okay, the matter will go back to the committee. Are there any questions or comments regarding the rest of the report? Mr. Bills?
A couple paragraphs down from that, it looked like there was a big question. And that was regarding our telecommunicators contract. And so it looked like we had a motion come out of there unless legal counsel changes it before the board meeting. So what has legal counsel did with this contract? Did they even look at it? Or?
It's right in front of you on your desk. Everybody has a copy that was placed there this morning. Emails that came back from Mr. Powers.
And what does it say in summary of that?
Well, basically, I would hope everybody would read it. The summary of it says that the back pay issue is something that is implied through the arbitrator's ruling and the other parts of the whole process, that we're obligated to pay that. The other part about the no strike clause indicated there that Mr. Powers says that that's something that's typically included in all contracts of this type, and it is included in the other union contracts that we have here with FOP, with AFSCME, and so forth. So we need to include that in this contract also. That's a brief summary of what Mr. Powers has said.
Let me understand, you're saying that the language is fine in the contract
Yes,
by our legal counsel?
yes. Anybody else? Mr. Alt?
Is there a question where the Republicans and Democrat precinct committee members are going to meet in the month of July? I mean, that's between now and our next meeting.
Between now and the time that it's decided upon, they'll still have access to the building. And arrangements will be made if proper procedures are followed to ensure that both parties can get access and come in. Anybody else? Seeing nothing else, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Balance of the report.
Yep.
Curtis. Hasbargen. Johnson. Crumweedy. Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Apple. Persley. Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt.
Yes.
Barons.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Kokenauer.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
18. Yeah. I'm sorry. 17-0.
That motion's approved 17-0. Finance Committee, Mr. Alt.
Mr. Chairman and the members of the county board, your committee to whom was referred finance would beg leave to submit the following report on the matters before them. Your committee met at the Administration Center on June 7, 2018 at 9 a.m. Member present were Michael McTaggart, Charlie Alt, Russell Bills, Ernie Curtis, Sherry Johnson, and Dan Raymond. Kyle Anderson was absent. Also present, County Board Chairman John Scher, Sheriff Derek Hagan, Treasurer Mindy Coons Hagan, Probation Director Tom Letham, EMA Director Eric Cece, 911 Director Eric Raymond, Susie Warner with Homestar Insurance, and Wendy Davis with the Times Republic. Meeting was called to order. It was moved by Dan Raymond, a second by Ernie Curtis to approve agenda. Motion carried by a voice vote. There was no public comment. Susie Werner of Homestar Insurance reported that she worked with the insurance carriers to have the renewal released. Health Alliance, Delta Dental, and IMED should have their renewals released by June 21st, and Werner will be able to present the information at the July meeting. Department heads gave their monthly report. They are as follows. Treasurer Mindy Coons-Hagen reports her office is continuing to catch up on tax collection. The help provided by Jill Johnson in the Finance Department has been appreciated. EMA Director Eric Cece reports that the Policy and Procedures approved receiving a donation of a vehicle. Cece current budget will allow for the maintenance of the vehicle. Sheriff Derek Hagan reports that all for service through May have been calls for service through May have increased 37% over last year. Hagan reminds the committee of the written proposal he had given them in reports to what he would like to see done with the public safety money that has been collected. First option was personnel. Hagan stressed additional deputies are desperately needed. The second option was equipment. Hagan said the mobile data computer in the squad cars are 10 years old and use Verizon software, which will be obsolete in 2019. The portable radios and fingerprint machines also need replaced. The cost to replace these items is approximately $100,000. Hagan stated he would prefer to hire personnel with the public safety tax money. The cost to hire 2 deputies, pay for training, uniforms, and equipment is also approximately $100,000. Lastly, Hagan said the increase in service calls were domestic and traffic related. Sheriff Department typically average 500 to 600 calls each month, but they received more than 800 calls in May. Probation Director Tom Latham reported contract negotiations are in final stages. The committee discussed finding for the arbitration ruling. Michael McTaggart reported tentative amount of back pay through May is $292,000. Based upon the report provided by Hagan, the Public Safety Tax Fund currently has a balance of $206,000, and the fund will continue to increase monthly. McTaggart suggests using the public safety tax funds to back pay to the telecommunicators. McTaggart said there should also be enough funds available to accommodate Hagan's request as well. It was moved by Russell and seconded by Charles to pay the liability to the telecommunicators arbitration ruling using monies from the Public Safety Fund. A roll call vote was taken. McTaggart A, Ault A, Bills A, Curtis A, Johnson A, Raymond nay. Motion carried. All questions, the interest rates being paid to the telecommunication during the arbitration process. However, interest would only be paid to the telecommunicators if the county refused their back pay. To the committee received claims. The committee received claims. It was moved by Ault and seconded by Raymond to pay the claims subject to county board approval. A roll call vote was taken. Motion carried. During new business, McTaggart discussed the finance director vacancy. McTaggart stated that there weren't any responses from the ads that ran in the newspaper and on the county website. The search has been extended to Zip Recruiting and Indeed.com, and more resumes are being received. McTaggart said he has also talked with Hope Wheeler at Clifton, Larson, Allen, they have expressed an interest in subletting their service as a consultant. McTaggart said if they are hired on a consultant, it would not be a conflict with them conducting our audit, and because they would simply be in a consulting role, and all management roles are handled through the committees. As there was no further business to come before the committee, it was moved by Bills and seconded by Raymond to adjourn at 9:25 p.m. Motion carried by a voice call vote, all of which is respectfully submitted. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
I make a motion to approve.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the report.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the Finance Committee report. Is there a second? Mr. Bills. Are there any questions or comments about the report? Mr. Bowman?
Can we just discuss anything that's on the report?
Yeah,
Or we don't have to separate it, right?
you can discuss anything in the report.
So we're gonna drain, the way it looks like to me, we're gonna drain the public safety tax, just to pay the telecommunicators.
That's what the Finance Committee approved, yes.
I thought there was some talk about another couple of accounts between Kyle and Mike, but I guess they're not here, so I can't ask that question, that they were gonna take the money out of there. So if we do that, are we gonna pay the new wages out of the safety and public safety tax for the communicators too?
No, the new wages will get paid out of the Joint Dispatch Fund.
And there's enough in the budget to do that.
I believe so.
So, the way I look at it, how long will it take to get the 100,000 so the sheriff can actually get back to what the public safety tax was intended for?
The public safety tax is intended for all matters relating to public safety. The telecommunicators are a part of that.
Because of our screw up and our attorney?
No, because 911 is a part of public safety. We didn't screw up either, Mr. Bowman.
We did not miss the date, the file way back when this all started? I thought that come out in the meeting.
The arbitrator's ruling is the arbitrator's ruling. We're obligated to go with that. Anybody else? Mrs. Kroll?
No dates have been set for budget hearings yet?
What hearing?
She wants to know if there have been any dates set for budget hearings.
Not that I'm aware of.
When will we begin to address that?
Right now, it's my understanding that budget hearings will proceed in the month of July. Mr. Lemay?
I agree that technically this falls under safety tax. I don't think that the voting public necessarily saw that as a potential use for it. I don't think anybody could have predicted it. I would like for us to not necessarily, we can use it for it, but I really don't like the idea of completely draining it and using all the funds from it that's for that. I would like to see if we could find someplace else to at least partially pay for this. I have no problem, we have to pay it, but coming all from the safety tax, I don't think, to the letter of the law, yes, we're living up to it. To the spirit of the law, we may not be. So I'd really like to see if we can get some funds someplace else so it's not completely draining the safety tax fund.
Mr. Behrens?
I don't like the idea of using it for that either, but I believe, if my memory serves me, that was one of the reasons that the arbitrator gave, was we have plenty of money because of the safety tax.
That's correct, and at the time the safety tax was passed, there was an individual that toured the county touting the safety tax and the fact that it would support 911, along with other things, so.
Yes, Troy?
What is the projected safety tax amount for the rest of this year? And
I think what's in that report may not be quite correct. It says on this piece of paper here, the balance is $241,647. And there'll be some additional money hopefully coming in because that represents through the month of March. However, the plan that Mr. McTaggart had brought forward at the Finance Committee was that if there isn't enough money in the public safety tax, that additional or part would come out of the general fund.
John.
And then when the public safety fund.
John, Treasurer might give you an update.
Just a minute.
I'm sorry.
Let me finish. When the public safety fund balance is built up, then the general fund would be reimbursed. Mrs. Hagan.
The correct amount that Mike actually used at that finance meeting that I gave him was $270,000, not the $206,000. And then later that day, we got the $35,000 payment from Springfield. So that the actual balance right now is $306,174.
According to our projections, that's sufficient to.
What we have received so far in payments since the beginning, we're averaging about $1,100 per day in Iroquois County.
Mr. Behrens.
When is it that we have to pay this? Is it a possibility that we can stagger payments to them, or?
I brought that question up to Mr. Devine, and he indicated that that's something that probably not, but that if that was something we wanted to do, we would have to go through the union lawyer. He does not think we would want to approach the individual.
So when is it that we have to pay this?
As soon as possible. When the meeting, since we've approved the contract, when the meeting is over with, I'll sign the contract. We'll begin processing it, getting a copy back to the union. Amanda can finish the calculations on the payroll and begin work on that. Mr. Kokonow.
I would just like to make a comment, Mr. Chairman. If all this money comes out of the safety tax, which I'm not totally against, are we sure we're going to have enough money for our Mr. Hagan's concerns, which he requested in the earlier meetings?
Based on the projections of around $35,000 to $40,000 a month coming into that fund, that should be the case. Anybody else?
Well, it's something that we have to pay, let's just move on. Get it behind us, move on.
Okay, seeing no other comments, clerk will call the roll, please.
Aspargan. Yes. Johnson. Yes. Crumweedy. Yes. Lemay.
No.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Awful.
Yes.
Persley.
No.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Alt.
Yes.
Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman.
No.
Kopenauer.
No.
Crow. Yes. Curtis. 14-4, motion carried.
Okay, Management Committee, Mr. Behrens.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your committee to whom was referred Management Services would beg leave to submit the following report on matters before them. Your committee met at the Administrative Center on June 4th, 2018 at 9 a.m. Members present were Behrens, Alt, Johnson, and Awful. Kevin Bowman, Larry Hasbargen, and Chad McGinnis were absent. Also present were Maintenance Supervisor Chris Drake, Ori Cummings, and Ray Lesnick from SmartWatt. County Clerk Lisa Fancher, Veteran Services Superintendent Jennifer Ingram, John Wilkening, member of the Veterans Assistance Commission, 911 Director Eric Raymond, Loda resident Paula Rosso, and Wendy Davis with the Times Republic. The meeting was called to order. It was moved by Mrs. Awful and seconded by Mr. Alt to approve the agenda. Motion carried by a voice vote. Paula Rosso of Loda explained that she was at the Policy and Procedure Committee meeting regarding the Democratic Central Committee not being allowed to hold their meeting in the county boardroom. She appreciated the issue was going to be discussed later in the meeting and countered that central committees are elected by voters and function somewhat in a governmental capacity. Management Chairman Lyle Behrens opened the bids received for waste hauling services for the county. The bids were as follows. Republic Services 4-yard dumpster for courthouse and jail, $52. 1 time a week pickup, and $104 for 2 time a week pickup. 6-yard dumpster at Administrative Center, $78 for 1 time a week pickup, and $154 for 2 times a week pickup. Boom Garden, 2 times a week pickup, $275 per month for a 2-year contract. A&J Disposal 6-yard dumpster, $100 for 1 time a week pickup and $140 for 2 time a week pickup. 4-yard dumpster, $70 1 time a week pickup and $100 for 2 time a week pickup. The committee discussed the bids received and questioned whether the bid for A&J Disposal was for 1 year or 2. Maintenance Supervisor Chris Drake called A&J Disposal and they confirmed that the pricing in their bid would in fact be good for a 2-year contract if the county chose to go with a 2-year contract. It was moved by Mrs. Awful, seconded to accept the bid from A&J for a 2-year term. The motion carried unanimously by a roll call vote. The committee briefly spoke about a staffing grant that is available through Ameren. It was a consensus of the committee that it would be worthwhile for the county to apply for the grant once more information is gathered regarding energy efficiencies. Veteran Services Superintendent Jennifer Ingram presented a diagram and estimate for work that has been proposed for the former Animal Control Office. The proposal includes flooring and material to build a wall in the former Animal Control Office. There will be no electrical or venting work necessary, and all the labor will be donated by local veterans who are also contractors. She will be using money in her budget to pay for the material expense. Jennifer said this would be the first step to provide more services for veterans, while also allowing for more privacy, which is necessary. It was moved by Mrs. Johnson, second to move forward with the proposal and presented by Mrs. Ingram. The motion carried by a roll call vote. The committee opened and reviewed the requests for proposal for a guaranteed energy savings contract that were received from SmartWatt and Johnson Controls. Lori Cummings of SmartWatt explained to the committee that they would choose either company based on their qualifications presented and then move forward with an audit of the county building to come up with an energy conservation plan that would include updates and measures that would include guaranteed cost savings for the county. He said when possible they will use local contractors to perform the work. However, there are a few projects such as the chiller and the courthouse, at the courthouse and jail, that Maintenance Supervisor Chris Drake is having trouble finding contractors interested in doing the work. For projects like these, SmartWatt would ensure these things are fixed correctly and qualified contractors are hired. In closing, Ori said his company would also apply for grants such as those grants offered through Ameren and previously discussed in the meeting. The committee continued review of the proposals. Mrs. Johnson said she was impressed with Johnson Controls. However, she feels the need of Iroquois County are small in the broad spectrum and felt SmartWatt would work well with the county's needs. It was moved by Mrs. Johnson, second, to use SmartWatt for energy efficiency project. The motion carried by a roll call vote. Maintenance Supervisor Chris Drake reported on the following. The annual inspection of the roof in the jail has been completed by Langlois Roofing and was presented. While there have been repairs, they estimate the roof will be good for another 3 to 5 years. Elevators have been inspected at the courthouse and jail. Boilers at the administrative center will be inspected this coming week.
Work has begun on the courthouse parking lot, including curb work and smaller patching. The main project will begin on Thursday or Friday of this week. The chiller at the courthouse has had some fan motor issues, and one fan was swapped out. The expanded steel project on the second floor of the jail is complete. The fuel pump in the maintenance truck is out and will need to be replaced. Mrs. Johnson recommended that Chris find out the maker of the membrane of the rubber roof at the jail, as there are warranties that require them to compensate consumer for repairs that are made. He confirmed that he would follow up on that recommendation. Mr. Alt voiced concerns about the utilization of storage space at the administrative center. He spoke with the lift company, Garavanta Lift Illinois, about the possibility adding an elevator or lift in the administrative center in order to make the second story storage area more accessible. He felt this might free up some of the storage areas on the first floor, which in turn could help create more available office space. The committee began discussion on establishing a policy for the use of the county boardroom. Mr. Behrens explained that there was a situation with the Democratic Central Committee being unable to access the county boardroom for their regularly scheduled meeting on May 24th, 2018 because no one was available to unlock the building. The Policy and Procedure Committee discussed the matter and decided that the Managed Services Committee should create a policy regarding after-hours use of the county boardroom and administrative center. Mr. Behrens distributed a working draft of a policy for a management committee to review. The committee reviewed the policy presented and will address it at their July meeting. The committee discussed solar opportunities for the county farm. Mrs. Johnson felt the longer the county stalls, the fewer opportunities there are going to be, and the companies that have shown interest in coming to Iroquois County will lose interest. She felt because we have a well-written solar ordinance in place, proceeding with a bid would be in the best interest of the county. It was moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded to put a portion of the county farm out for bid for a solar farm. Roll call vote was taken. Ayes, Alt, Behrens, Johnson. Nays, Awful. Motion carried. The committee reviewed the claims. It was moved by Mrs. Johnson, second to pay the claims subject to county board approval. A roll call vote was taken. The motion carried unanimously by a roll call vote. During old business, Mrs. Johnson asked for an update on the utility bill audit. Maintenance Supervisor Chris Drake felt that the audit has been dropped because of the county moving forward with energy efficiency proposals. There was no new business. It was moved by Mrs. Awful and second to adjourn the meeting at 10:30 a.m. Motion carried by a voice vote, all of which is respectfully submitted, and I move for its adoption.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the management report. Is there a second? Mrs. Awful. Are there any questions or comments about the report?
Well, one thing I noticed was it was not a regularly scheduled meeting of the Democratic Party. It was a special meeting, I believe. Am I correct?
It was the regularly scheduled meeting,
Okay.
but we switched regular days.
Okay, so it was, and that's where the confusion came in.
Agreed.
Okay. Other than that, and we have SmartWatt and Johnson Controls here. I know there's been some questions as to what we want to do with that, so I guess this is our opportunity to ask questions or hear them, because we are talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so does anybody have questions or concerns?
Before we vote, why don't you review briefly for all of our benefits on the actions or the services that will be provided?
I guess it's a good thing both are here because they can probably define what they're able to do better. So I guess we can start with Johnson Controls if they just want to give a brief overview of what they're thinking, and then we can go to SmartWatt with what they're thinking.
Good morning, everyone. I'm
Jason Myers, Johnson Controls. Thanks.
Could you come please forward so that we can hear you?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to be here this morning. I'm Jason Myers with Johnson Controls. Just quickly, what our value we think we bring to this. We've been in business in Illinois since 1885, and projects like this are the lifeblood of our organization. I know there's a lot of concern with Johnson Controls. It's a large company. What does that mean for rural Iroquois County? Well, the projects that I focus on are very similar to this in size and scope, and this is what I'm a small town farm kid from central Illinois, so this is big money to me too, and so we don't take that lightly. We understand the concerns, and we want to be fully invested with you in this, and when we talk about the chiller as part of this project and finding resources for that, that's something that Johnson Controls will bring, and over 1,600 employees in the state. And if we are not able to find local contractors that are qualified, we've got those available that we will have available to you all. Another thing about our size is the buying power that we bring. So we think, well, Johnson Controls is big, they're going to be expensive, right? Not the case. Due to our size, we're able to buy in large quantities, which drives the price down for you and allows us to provide a more quality service. So our process here would be to hand in hand do an investment grade audit of your facility. So we've been here. We have a very good idea of what the project looks like, but we're still going to need to continue to investigate, gather pricing, walk contractors and gather bids and so forth for this. And calculate savings that obviously are going to be guaranteed to the county, and then look at the funding mechanism and how all the dollars and cents play out. We'll apply for the grants and rebates for you throughout that process, and be ready to, due to our resources, be ready to turn this around pretty quickly for the county to make a decision, as I know budgets are looming. So I know timing is of the essence here, and we're able to quickly deploy, provide the quality, turnkey, precision services that you'd be looking for.
One concern from last month was we're not wanting to borrow any money. Yep. So I think what we've tried to discuss with both companies is if we budget for the chiller this year and for the next project is that something you guys are willing to do?
It can, yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to look at this. This is your decision. So our goal is to present you with a shopping cart of what projects there are, what the savings and how the numbers shake out, and this is ultimately your decision to decide what to do, if anything. We've got, in the recent years, we've done over 65 projects in Illinois, very similar to this, ranging from $3,000 to $30 million. And so we know what the process is going to entail and what you guys will be need to look for. We'll help you walk through that. We've got more experience in this than anybody in the business. We pioneered the industry. So.
And why should we go with either of you?
Well,
I guess why should we go with you?
Yeah.
What benefit do you bring?
Sure, you're looking at self-performance as an option, right? Well, can we do all this ourselves? It surely is an option, and that's something to weigh, heavily. And what we found through the years that we've been doing this is that every month, every day that we go on, we're spending more than we need to on wasted energy costs. And so the speed to market that we bring will allow you to start reaping those savings rewards earlier. You've got systems that are struggling and limping along, and instead of putting Band-Aids on those, we can quickly address those to help the budget situation out. And it's Illinois, right? The budgets are terrible. So this would be help your budgets align better with some of the operational costs that you're spending and the energy spend that you're wasting. We could bring speed to market, and due to our size, and the buying power that we bring, I don't mean size to be intimidating, but the buying power will offset the cost of self-performing. We found that time and time again that when we stack the numbers up, and then there's a risk transfer. There's no risk to the county on this type of project at all. Johnson Controls bears all the risk financially, performance-wise, and we take the headache of the project management off of it for you all.
Where do you stand on local contractors?
Where do we stand? We love to use them. It's a win for both of us. We love to, most of the jobs that we do bring a lot of business, a lot of economy to the local counties and cities that we work in. As much as possible, we want to use local labor because that's great for you all in your positions. It's great for the local businesses. Our role is to put them, We have a thorough vetting process to make sure that they're qualified and to make sure that the prices and everything submitted are fair and align with industry standards. But we love to work with local labor because that's a win for both of us and helps the project along. Nobody knows these buildings better than you all. We know that. So we want their input as well. So.
If we decide to go with your firm, we'll have to sign a contract with you? Is that correct?
Yeah, we'd sign a
Has
development
that contract been reviewed by our state's attorney?
Not yet. Can be in your hands today.
I guess we can make anything contingent on the state's attorney approval of a contract. Any other questions for him, we'll bring up. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Good morning. I'm Ray Lesnick with SmartWatt. I am a substitute sort of today for Ori Cummings, who could not be here. He had a planned vacation for this weekend, and when we met last week with the Building and Grounds Committee, we had gone through a lot of the details on how we approach a project. And I'm an engineer, so I apologize if I'm not as polished as Ori would be in my discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of using SmartWatt. As a company, I myself am very passionate about energy savings, and it's one reason that I'm in the business. So I bring that passion to projects, but I don't necessarily always get it across unless you get me into a conversation about the engineering in the project and what goes on in the facility. SmartWatt as a company is, I would call it probably a medium-sized company, only about 300 employees, but we're across the United States in multiple, I think it's 8 offices. We have offices in Illinois. In Northbrook is where I work out of, and in my career I've worked all over the country on all different types of facilities. SmartWatt itself handles projects from small projects from $10,000 up to multi-million-dollar projects, depending on the customers, and we work with small customers like yourself, and up through Fortune 500 companies on projects. So we are a medium-sized company that gives us flexibility to work with smaller customers or any customer and give them a more personal treatment. That is all that we do, is we are in the energy business. So that's the focus of our company. We don't have multiple other parts of our company. And that's one reason we're not as big. We're very focused on what we do. We like to give customers flexibility in their projects. We are also working, Ori's focus in Illinois is county facilities. And he's very focused right now. We're working with 2 counties in southern Illinois, Pulaski and Alexander. And one is fairly small, Alexander. Pulaski has a little bit larger facilities, probably more on par with your types of facilities. So we're used to approaching projects and customizing our approach to to the customer, not from what we want to see, or we don't force our approach on the customer. So I see that advantage. We also have purchasing power. We do projects across the country. We have national accounts with various different vendors so that we can buy equipment. Carrier is one example on the HVAC side. We have work with large lighting vendors across the country and to supply products. So we have a small approach, but the big capabilities behind it. So that's basically the sell on SmartWatt. So if there's any questions about...
And you'll also work within our budget so we don't have to borrow money?
Right. The financing part of the project, we will work with any type of financing that you want to do, from municipal lease to if you wanted to go out for a bond. If you actually had one customer the other day surprise us and say, we want to just pay for the project, which doesn't happen because most counties are cash strapped. So it can go any way, and we can work with that, but we will work with you on as far as how the project is financed. Also, do you need to phase the project? Do you want to do, part of the project this year, next year, 2-3 years down the line? We can work with you on what works best with your budget and your comfort level. Any other questions?
Has your contract been reviewed by our state's attorney?
I do not know. Generally, Lori, so we can get that out to you today. There's really, it happens in 2 phases. We're really going to go to a letter of intent on an investment grade audit, which is the next step. So you're not obligated to jump right into a full contract with us to go into a, hey, we're going to do $1 million project. The idea is to go to the next step, which is an investment grade audit. There is an investment for that. It's usually in the 2 to 5% of the project cost. Just to give you a rough idea of what that cost would be. So we would go through the investment grade audit, and we put together a package. We work with you to structure the project that you want to do, what measures or items that you want to include or not include. And then once we put that investment grade audit together, which has fixed guaranteed pricing and fixed guaranteed savings, then we would go and put together the full contract of here's what we're going to do as part of the project, here's how we're going to do it, what phases, and all those details. So really the next step is not necessarily to do the full-blown contract, it's to do the investment grade audit.
I believe that's on both of them, to do an audit, and that does get into, that's where our costs start. And one reason we need to know pretty much today is because whoever we go with can then do the paperwork on the Ameren grant that Mrs. Johnson brought us, and that's due by the end of the month. So, and that's $80,000 that we could get, which would help pay for a lot of this, of their part of it. So I guess, any other questions for him?
Thank you.
So, I guess my thought is we have 2 very good companies. We just need to decide who. And there was a lot of concerns. That's why I wanted to make sure everybody understood that both companies will work with us as far as our budgeting and not get into debt. Other than that, currently the motion is to accept SmartWatt. I guess if we want to change that, we'd have to pull it out for separate consideration, or we can just move forward. At this point, it's up to you guys. Yep.
I guess I'm still a little confused. We have to pick a particular consultant for this, or is it by the project? SmartWatt is just for this particular project.
What they'll do, that's what the audit will, they'll go and they'll look at all the buildings and say, this is where your efficiencies need to be updated, and they'll give us estimated, well, guaranteed costs, is it, and guaranteed savings.
Okay. So if there were multiple projects, could you engage with either or both companies?
Well, in order to do that, I guess the problem is then both are going to have to do the energy audit, which comes at a cost. So, yes, we could go one company with one for the other, but it becomes inefficient money-wise. And just because they come to us with all the proposals of these projects, I think they both stated that we can pick and choose what we want to do and when we want to do it, which helps us. Then we can, we got a priority right now on the chiller. and we can budget that for next year, and then the next priority, we could budget for the next year, and not go into debt that way. Otherwise, they could do financing for us, but I think last month it was pretty clear that nobody wants to go into debt, so.
So the committee chose SmartWatt.
Yes.
Were things unsure? Johnson Control came today.
Their
second thoughts?
Johnson Control was unable to come to that meeting. They wanted to be here today, and we wanted to make sure it was fair, so everybody was here. And so, you know, like I said, at this point, it's up to you guys. It wouldn't be the first time you've overturned us.
No, but as a voting board member, I come here and I trust the committees do all their homework.
Right.
I have zero visibility to this other than what I read in the minutes.
Right. So.
Thank you.
Yep. So I guess at this point, there's a motion and a second. So if nobody's going to pull it out for further consideration, we can just move on.
Okay, I guess you can call the roll.
Okay. Johnson. Yes. Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Apple. Yes. Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Willow.
Yes.
Alt.
Yes.
Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman. Kokenauer.
Yes.
Crow. Yes. Curtis. Passepartout. Motion carried 18-0.
Tax Committee, Mr. Sticknot.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your committee to whom was referred tax would beg leave to submit the following report on the matters before them. Your committee met at the Administrative Center on June 5, 2018 at 9 a.m. Members present were Sticknot, Crumweedy, Offal, Persley, and Whitlow. Kokenauer and McTaggart were absent. Also present, County Board Chairman John Schurer, County Clerk Lisa Fancher, Supervisor of Assessments Bob Yorgler, Animal Control Administrator Dr. Youssef, Roger Bard, Bill Nutter, and Wendy Davis with the Times-Republic. The meeting was called to order. It was moved by Troy Crumweedy and seconded by Barbara Offal to approve the agenda. Motion carried by a voice vote. The committee reviewed the claims. It was moved by Persley and seconded by Crumweedy to pay the claims subject to County Board approval. Motion carried by a roll call vote. There were no public comments. The committee discussed the prevailing wage ordinance. County Clerk Lisa Fancher explained companies that complete any work on a public structure are required to pay their employees prevailing wage. The hourly wages vary by job type. All government entities approve the ordinance annually. It was moved by Whitlow and seconded by Persley to approve the prevailing wage ordinance. Motion carried by a voice vote. The department heads gave their monthly reports. County Clerk Lisa Fancher reported she hosted the County Clerk and Recorder Zone meeting in Paxton. The meeting focused on cybersecurity and predictable fee schedules. The predictable fee schedule will allow financial institutions and realtors to know their document recording costs when closing on a home. A fee study for the last 3 years is being performed, which consists of every document type, how many recorded, the fee to record the document, and then the average over 3 years. The predictable fee schedule must be in effect by January 1, 2019, and approved by the County Board 60 days prior. Fancher said if our fees decrease due to the results of the fee study, another fee study can be done to increase the fees or keep them the same. The additional fee study would be a cost to the county. Lastly, Fancher discussed cybersecurity. Fancher said she worked with area-wide on preparing a document to send to a senator who was asking for information on how our county was handling cybersecurity in 2016 when the State Board of Elections was hacked. Fancher noted there will be money available through the Help America Vote Act, HAVA, funds, but she is unsure on how it will be able to be used. Fancher asked if area-wide could come to a meeting and update the board members on cybersecurity for the county. Crumweedy said an IT meeting is scheduled for July, and area-wide will be contacted and asked to discuss the 2018 budget considerations, which includes security management. Supervisor of Assessments Bob Yergler reported his office has been assisting the public with questions on their tax bills and also processing certificates of error. Yergler also reported there was pending legislation on solar assessment to be done uniformly around the state. Final reading was scheduled for Friday. Animal Control Director Dr. Youssef gave his report for May, which included 7 dogs picked up and brought to the clinic. 2 bats and a dog bite were reported to the committee, and all tested negative for rabies. Dr. Youssef stated the dog was unprovoked and bit a child. And then an investigation was done in regards to the dog that was reported running loose on April 24th. Dr. Youssef and Police Chief Jeremy Douglas met to discuss the case and also spoke with ICOM about who handled the initial call. Animal Control Warden Erica Turner received a call stating a dog was stuck in the water treatment plant. The caller was advised to contact Watseka Police Department because the city of Watseka must be the first responder when the case is within city limits. The caller later responded to Turner stating the owner of the dog had been found. 2 police officers responded to the call but were unable to retrieve the dog and made a judgment call to leave the dog at the water treatment plant. Dr. Youssef continued by saying the mayor has a limited budget for animal control and it is not possible for every dog to be responded to. Animal control is following the Iroquois County ordinance that is in place. As there was no further business to come before the committee, it was moved by Crumweedy and seconded by Awful to adjourn the meeting at 9:32 a.m. Motion carried by a voice vote, all of which is respectively submitted and signed by those present, and I move for its adoption.
The motion on the floor to approve the tax committee report. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Persley seconds. Are there any questions on the report? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Apple. Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
No.
Shure.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt. Barons.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Holman. Tokenauer.
Yes.
Crow. Curtis.
Yes.
Passbarger.
Yes.
Johnson. 16 to 1.
Motion's approved 16-1. Judicial and Public Safety, Mr. Behrens.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your committee to whom was referred Judicial and Public Safety would beg leave to submit the following report on matters before them. Your committee met at the courthouse on June 6, 2018 at 3 p.m. Members present were Behrens, Crow, Curtis, Lemay, and Awful. Chad McGinnis and Judd Whitlow were absent. Also present, Sheriff Derek Hagan, Coroner Bill Cheatham, Probation Supervisor Barb King, Circuit Clerk Lisa Hines, 911 Director Eric Raymond, County Board Chairman John Scher, and Wendy Davis with the Times Republic. The meeting was called to order. It was moved by Barb Awful and seconded by Vince Lemay to approve the agenda. Motion carried by a voice vote. There were no public comments. Sheriff Derek Hagan's monthly report for May read as follows. Patrol had 857 calls for service for the month of May. Year-to-date calls for service 3,292. 2017 year-to-date was 2,404, a 37% increase. Booked in 70 prisoners for the month of May. Year-to-date booked in 269. Average daily population in May was 31. Year-to-date average population was 21. Year-to-date average length of stay 18 days. Overtime in the jail for May was 168 hours on schedule. Part-time hours 0. 1 deputy off on workers' compensation. The increase in calls for the month are mostly related to domestic calls and traffic accidents. Hagan reported he spoke with the Finance Committee in February about a request for public safety funds for fiscal year 18. Hagan said he's requesting the hiring of 2 new deputies effective July 1, plus the purchase of uniforms, equipment, and a squad car, which would total approximately $100,000. His alternate request was for equipment. The quote for the live scan fingerprint machine is $25,000. The computers in the squad cars are about 10 years old, and Verizon has announced they will no longer support the 3G technology in these computers use. Effective 2019, the cost to replace the computers is $50,000. Lastly, the portable radios will need to be replaced at a cost of $16,000. Hagan said he will present these items to Finance Committee again. Hagan said his preference would be to hire personnel. Coroner Bill Cheatham reported the fatalities that occurred in May. Cheatham also reported there have been a total of 5 drug overdoses for the year. Probation Supervisor Barb King reviewed the Probation and Court Services Activity Report for the month for May with the committee. Circuit Clerk Lisa Hines distributed her monthly report to the committee for their review. A total of $55,003.66 was received in fines and fees. $8,969.42 was received from credit collection partners. Hines reported there is a vacancy in the Circuit Clerk's office. 911 Director Eric Raymond distributed the ETSB report for May. Raymond reported there is still a vacancy in his department. Donna Crow asked Raymond to update the committee on the next generation 911 compliance. Raymond said the last conversation he had about next generation 911 was with the state administrator for 911, and the biggest challenges he is currently facing is specifically what is needed because there isn't a defined list. However, a lot of equipment is ready for next generation 911, such as the phone system, recording system, and CAD system. The committee discussed changing the July meeting date. It was moved by Crow, second by Awful, to change the July Judicial Committee meeting date to July 5th, 2018 at 10:30 a.m. Motion carried by a voice vote. The committee reviewed claims. It was moved by Crow and second by Awful to pay the claims subject to county board approval. A roll call vote was taken. Motion carried. As there was no further business to come before the committee, it was moved by Crow, second by Awful, to adjourn the meeting at 3:28 p.m. Motion carried by a voice vote, all of which is respectfully submitted, and I move for its adoption.
So, motion on the floor to approve the judicial report. Is there a second? Second. Mrs. Awful, are there any questions or comments on the report? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Awful. Yes. Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Alt. Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Kopenauer.
Yes.
Crow. Yes. Curtis. Askebargen. Yes. Johnson. Crumweedy.
Yes.
Motion carried 17.
Motion's approved 17-0. Planning and zoning report, Mr. Raymond.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your committee to whom is referred Planning and Zoning would beg leave to submit the following report on the matters before them. Your committee met at the Administrative Center on June 8, 2018 at 10:15 a.m. Members present were Raymond, Sticknoth, Curtis, and Persley. McGinnis was absent. Also present, Board Chairman John Schur, Supervisor of Assessment Bob Yergler, IDA Director Ken Berrigree, and Wendy Davis from the Times-Republic. Meeting was called to order as moved by Sticknoth, seconded by Curtis to approve the agenda. Motion carried by a voice vote. There were no public comments. The committee reviewed the Planning and Zoning Office report for May. It reads as follows. Building permits, May 2018, residential 6. Building permits fiscal year 18, residential 22. Agriculture 8. Building inspections, May 2018, 90. Yergler provided the committee with a list of permits dated January 1st, 2018 through May 31st, 2018. Yergler noted a new construction inspector has been hired. Also, the mileage for construction inspections is higher this month because Yergler has instructed the new construction inspector to update our files to the best of his ability. Lastly, Yergler gave a final update on the flood. Yergler stated there have already been 3 homes torn down due to flood. Others are in the process of tearing down, rebuilding, or elevating their homes. All damage assessment is done through the Planning and Zoning Office. There is also relief available as of the flood date forms. Forms are available in the assessment office. The committee discussed encouraging new construction within the county. Yergler commented they reduced the minimum size of the structure from 900 square feet, but it hasn't seemed to affect. Most individuals are still building 1,500 square foot homes. The construction outside the corporate limits has been in the agricultural sector. These include Farm Service Plant in Gilman, Farm Service Distribution Center in Onarga. Farm Service is building a new structure in Milford, and Crop Production is building a new structure outside of Sheldon. There are also several grain elevators that are continuing to build grain storage. IDA Director Ken Berrigree told the committee members that he worked with the City of Watseka several years ago to assemble a committee to solicit retirees to the area in an effort to increase the declining population, but nothing ever came of the committee. The committee reviewed claims. It was moved by Sticknoff, seconded by Curtis. It was moved by Curtis, seconded by Persley, to pay the claim subject to county board approval. A roll call vote was taken, motion carried. During old business, Sticknoff noted he had been contacted by someone that lives on Porter Avenue in Watseka. They questioned whether or not the solar farm would cause additional flooding on Porter Avenue. The committee was unsure how to answer at this time, but will keep it in mind as the tentative solar farm progresses. Berrigree said he has discussed enterprise zones with the committee and would be willing to investigate again to see what incentives there are to offer to those who are looking to build within the county. The committee agreed Berrigree should pursue looking into enterprise zones. During new business, Persley questioned Yergler about the rumors of a planning and zoning being sued because of billboards in the Loda area. Yergler stated the matter is not a planning and zoning issue, it is an assessment issue. In all matters concerning this will be reported to the tax committee. Yergler is currently working with State's Attorney Jim Devine on issues that have come up in Loda Township. There are attorneys involved on behalf of the property owners. At this time, there is nothing to discuss with the county board, but Yergler will keep the county board informed when he has further information. As there was no further business to come before the committee, it was moved by Sticknoff, seconded by Curtis, to adjourn at 10:57 a.m., all of which is respectfully submitted, signed by all members present, and I move for its adoption.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the planning and zoning report. Is there a second? Mr. Persley, are there any questions or comments about the report? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Awful. Yes. Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Barron. Mills.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Okenauer.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
Curtis.
Yes.
Hasbargen.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
17-0.
That motion's approved 17-0. Transportation and Highway, Mr. Bills.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your committee whom referred Transportation and Highway with Bagley Smith the following report on the matters before them. Your committee met at the Iroquois County Highway Building on June the 8th, 2018 at 9 a.m. Members present was Bills, Alt, Crow, Ashbarg, and Sherry Johnson. Kevin Bowman and Chad McGinnis were absent. Also present, County Engineer Joe Moore, County Board Member Marvin Sticknot, and Wendy Davis of the Times Republic. The meeting was called to order. It was moved by Donna Crow, second by Larry Hashbargen, to approve the agenda. That motion carried. There was no public comment. The claims and financial reports for the month were reviewed. It was moved by Hashbargen and seconded by Sherry Johnson to pay the bills subject to county board approval. A roll call vote was taken. That motion carried. County Highway was $55,791. County Bridge was $36,253. Township Bridge was $150,768. County motor fuel tax was $77,401. Township motor fuel tax was $295,309. County Engineer Joel Moore reviewed current projects with the committee. Moore said that these projects consist of cable line bridge in Middleport Township, 2 pipes being put in Prairie Green Township, and a box culvert in Belmont Township. Also, the asphalt project in Melks Grove will begin on June the 25th. As there was no further business to come before the committee, it was moved by Charles Alt and seconded by Johnson to adjourn at 9:22 a.m. That motion carried, all of which is respectfully submitted, signed by all members present, and I would move for adoption of this report.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the Transportation Highway Committee report. Is there a second? Mr. Hasbargen. Are there any questions or comments about the report? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Awful. Yes. Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman. Kokenauer.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
Curtis.
Yes.
Hasbargen. Johnson. Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
17-0.
That motion's approved 17-0. Claims. Everyone has a copy of the claims in front of them. Is there a motion to approve the claims? Mr. Whitlow, is there a second? Mrs. Awful, are there any questions about the claims? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll, please.
Persley.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Shore.
Yes.
Sticknot.
Yes.
Whitlow.
Yes.
Behrens.
Yes.
Bills.
Yes.
Bowman.
Yes.
Kokenauer.
Yes.
Crow.
Yes.
Curtis. Hasbargen.
Yes.
Johnson. Crumweedy.
Yes.
Lemay.
Yes.
McGinnis.
Yes.
Awful. 17-0.
The motion's approved 17-0. In front of you, you have a list of the appointments. Is there a motion to approve those appointments? Mr. Raymond, is there a second? Mr. Bills, any questions about the appointments? Seeing none, all in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign. Appointments are approved. Is there any old business today? Is there any new business? Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Raymond, is there a second? Mr. Crumweedy, all in favor, aye. Opposed, same sign. Meeting is adjourned.